Hi there, Richard Tubb here, and I'm joined today by Domotz Chief Product Officer, JB Fowler. How are you doing today?
I am doing excellent, Richard. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Now, I'm putting JB on the spot a little bit. We were having a conversation and he was talking through all the latest features that are in the products. And I said, well, instead of us just talking about it, why don't we record it and show it to the world? And so JB's agreed to do that. But for anybody who's not familiar, perhaps, with your product and what Domotz does, how would you describe it to the managed service provider market?
You know, first and foremost, I'd say that Domotz is a network monitoring system. I mean, flat out, it's an NMS or MNS, whatever you want to say. As a network monitoring system, we fundamentally look at the network itself. We try to look at firewalls, routers, wireless access points, managed switches, making sure that they are fundamentally functioning correctly and working as you would expect them to. Where we start to differentiate, though, is when we look at all the other devices that are on the network. Any network-based system, anything that's grabbing a MAC address or has a MAC address and is trying to grab an IP address, we're looking at. And we're making sure that it is online. We're making sure that it's functioning properly. And that's really where we differentiate. And I think, Richard, when we kind of dive into a demo or look at what we're doing, you'll see how we classify these devices and how we set up alerts to make it easier for managed service providers to understand what's going on these networks that they're deploying.
Yeah. And I think the reason it'll be so fascinating to the MSP market is, of course, MSPs love to help people. They also love to make money as well. Or certainly I know I did when I ran my MSP business.
Hey, I'm very cool.
I'm sat here in the studio garage and I'm looking around and I can see at least a dozen devices just that I can see now that are IP connected. So I'm thinking any MSP, if they walk into their clients' offices and home offices now, there is just going to be a plethora of things that need managing.
So Richard, I'm hearing, and I'm sure you've heard the same type of thing, but people themselves now have multiple devices on them that are connected to the network, whether it's your mobile phone, which is an obvious one. If you're carrying around a laptop, that's one, but your smartwatches, those are connected. You're getting more and more health-based devices that are connected to the network. There is truly in the word plethora, right? There are a plethora of devices that are getting connected to the network. And the thing I want to point out for service providers, people that are managing the networks, they really need to have an understanding of when a device walks into their network and attaches to it, what is that device doing and why is it there? And it's difficult as more and more devices come about. And that's a problem that we're trying to solve for these service providers.
Yeah. So I'm eager to jump in, but before we do, and perhaps if I ask you to do a screen share and show what the product looks like, just want to clarify. So most managed service providers are familiar with remote monitoring and maintenance tools, RMM tools, and there's plenty of on the market. It is a well-established market. How would you say network management systems differ from that? Do you replace them? Is it side by side? What does it look like?
It's a great question. We get that question often. And I'm going to, first of all, answer no. We're not replacing what I consider to be traditional RMM tools. When I think of a traditional remote monitoring and management type of system, it's really, those are looking at servers, they're looking at laptops, they're looking at PCs, they're managing the antivirus on those systems, they're managing the patches that go into those systems, they're making sure that they're functioning per the policies put in place by that company. That's not what Domotz is about. Domotz is about understanding the network infrastructure itself. Again, I mentioned routers, firewalls, gateways, access points, but it's also about understanding all of those other devices that are being connected to that network. So if we can give you as a service provider awareness as to what's going on inside that network, it really helps you better manage things like security of the network. It helps you manage performance of the network. I mean, if you can look at a network as a whole and say, oh, I've got 30 security cameras on this network that are streaming video at a matter of 2 to 4 megabits per second. All of a sudden you realize if I've got a flat network, that's a problem. I need to start looking at VLANs and subnetting of these systems so that I can have the system perform better. That's what Domotz is about. And that's how we differentiate from the traditional RMM.
Yeah. So I'm itching to take a look. Just before we came on air, I was saying to you, I'm a massive geek. I know you've got an engineering background, so we're like-minded with this. would you mind doing a screen share and showing us around the tool, what it looks like?
Yeah, happy to do that. Let me bring this up here.
And while you're bringing that up as well, I should say for the benefit of people watching, one of the bits of feedback that I've had about Domotz is the ease of onboarding. It's really easy to get up and running quickly. Is that something, positive feedback that you've heard from your client base as well?
It is, Richard. In fact, one of the, when we first started out, the very first thing that we said was a minimum viable product is that this thing has to be easy to deploy, easy to onboard into an environment and network. Part of the challenge was for, service providers or integrators, anybody that's, building out a network or adding to a network, they really needed to have probably an overused term, but a plug and play type solution, something you can plug in, say, this is my device, and then have it just go to work for you automatically. And that's exactly what Domotz did here. So it's really easy to deploy, and we get that feedback all the time.
And the reason I bring that up is it's so important to me. When I was running a managed service provider business, and like most MSPs around, they're very time poor. So they want to help the clients, but it's like, if you're pitching a new product or something that's going to help, man, it's just got to hit the ground running. We haven't got time to mess around and do huge configuration. So I'm intrigued to see more, but I'll hand over to you. So this is the main dashboard, is it?
It is. So when this is a very multi-tenant dashboard here. Yeah. So when a service provider is setting up their systems, the very first view that they see here is this NOC view, Network Operations Center type of view, as we call it. I did mention it's multi-tenant. What we're doing here is we're looking at all of the sites that you as a service provider have deployed. And if I kind of hone in on my area where I am, which is here south of Salt Lake City, Utah, you can start to see that we can see the status of agents, very red, yellow, green centric stoplight type of centric view. When an agent is red, it means that the agent itself, the network agent that's sitting on the network that I'm monitoring, is not communicating with the cloud, right, for some reason. When it's green, everything's running as expected. Important devices are working well. No security issues are found. It really gets interesting, though, when things go yellow here. When you see yellow systems, that means that there are important devices that are offline, or, like I said, a security system.
Okay.
We can get out of this view by clicking on a particular site or clicking on a dot. This actually takes us into our dashboard here that gives you all the information that you need about that site. Now, you were talking about onboarding. One of the things that I should mention to you is there's three major components to Domotz. The first, of course, is the cloud. We are a software as a service. We're a cloud-based solution. That cloud is where a lot of the intelligence sits, but the cloud does some amazing things for you. It's what allows you the secure connectivity into these networks from anywhere in the world. It's also what does a lot of the encryption and the traffic management inside these systems. It's also what tells the agent to be scanning and looking for particular devices. The agent, speaking of the agent is a single piece of software that resides on the network. You're not putting one on every endpoint. That's something that's different from a traditional RMM as well, to the point you made earlier. There's a single piece of software that resides either on a Windows machine, it can run on a Linux machine. You can even purchase a Domotz box that is running the agent itself. So you talk about ease of deployment. We have a lot of service providers that love that feature because they're not having to stand up a separate PC just to run the Domotz agent. Right? They can use this little black box.
And what type of spec do you need for the machine there? I mean, we're talking something more powerful than a Raspberry Pi, for instance, or?
So, it's funny, you can actually run the Domotz agent on a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, wow. That's where my brain immediately went.
Yeah, that's funny. That tells you the level of complexity that you need. Obviously, if you have a higher performance machine when it comes to doing network speed tests and things like that, right, you get a little bit of advantage there. But from a resources perspective, the Domotz agent is actually very small, right? Very small on memory footprint, very small on CPU utilization. Very small on bandwidth. A lot of people ask if this device or this agent is, looking at the network, how much network performance is it consuming, and it's very, very small.
Got it. So you've got the Domotz agent sitting on a little black box or whichever machine that you want to put it on there. What next? What does it go and do next? Because I know people watching this video are going to be like, how intrusive is it?
It's a great question. So the very first thing it does, when you associate that agent back up into your Domotz account, it will actually immediately start scanning the network. Now it's looking at the network, and for those technical guys that are out there, right? You and me both appreciate this. From the 7 layers within a network stack, we're actually looking at layer 2 first and foremost. So we're looking at the VPN layer or looking at the MAC address layer. What we're doing is we're sending out ARP requests. We are looking for all of these MAC addresses. Here's a great example of a MAC address, right? That's 6 octet number, alphanumeric value that's out there. We're looking for those. And then what we're doing, and this is where the power of Domotz really comes in. Once we classify, or once we grab all of these, we start to classify the devices. Let's just take this driveway camera that's here. We will not only bring back what that MAC address is, but we're also going to give you at the layer 3 level, the IP address, and we're going to tell you the make, the model, and more importantly, the type of device this is. Now, why is this important? In a traditional RMM, you know that you're looking for servers, laptops, and PCs. But when you're dealing with a network and you're trying to figure out, hey, what am I dealing with? What's on this network? You really want to understand, okay, are these devices cameras? Are they part of the building automation system? Are they televisions that are in there or digital signage? And these are the types of things that Domotz will help classify. So if you, as a service provider, are walking into a job or a new potential customer, you kind of want to get some knowledge as to, okay, what am I about to deal with? Putting a Domotz agent in there, scanning that network, having it classify all these things really brings a level of knowledge that people didn't have before. Yes, they could go find IP addresses. Yes, they could find MAC addresses. But to actually figure out what those MAC addresses were, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
All of this is automatically done for you by Domotz. So we think this is a huge value add for service providers.
I mean, I'm sold. I was just thinking back to the amount of hours that I've spent when I was running an MSP, wandering about client sites and going, where's this MAC address? Is that a camera? Is it here? Is it there? You just don't know, and it drives you absolutely wild. I can actually see 2 real obvious applications here. So I'm guessing you've got MSPs who, as soon as they go in to audit a potential new client or a new client, the very first thing they're going to do is put the agent out there and get a real feel for what's going on. And then, of course, you also mentioned being aware of new devices coming on, because MSPs, this can be a real challenge. It's like, how long has that access point been there? Or how long has that camera been there? So being aware of new devices. Is that the sort of thing that you're seeing clients do?
Oh, it is. It is. So you'll notice we can talk about this later, but we got this network security tab as well. A couple of things that we do from an alerting perspective is show you when new devices are discovered.
Right.
I mean, part of, and I say this all the time, Richard, just like we're not replacing a traditional RMM, I don't want anybody thinking that we're replacing a SOC or a security operations center. That's not our function. But if you're managing a network, understanding what devices are on that network is an important part of security. And so one of the values that Domotz brings is that discovery of new devices. And we see MSPs and MSSPs for that matter, but MSPs using this tool just for that. It's like, okay, I have a security VLAN that I'm monitoring, making sure that it has security cameras in the NVR, and that should be it. If a new device shows up on that, that could be a problem. And so that type of awareness is something that service providers use all the time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And forgive me if we're jumping around here, because I'm actually excited about this. It's the geek in me coming out. But so my mind is immediately jumping to the idea of mapping these networks that are available as well. What sort of features can you offer to MSPs for mapping out what the network looked like?
So let me go to the map so they can see what it looks like, right? So network topology right there. Now, the thing I want you guys to realize, especially as we talk about that onboarding process and the discovery of devices, this mapping is also completely automated. Now, how do we do that? Well, as we discover all of the devices, and as we look at what their IP addresses are, the other thing that we're doing, in fact, let's just pick this device here.
Well, my next question was going to be, can we click on the devices and dig into
it? Yeah. This is where it gets really, really cool. So one of the things that we do is we look at these devices is we also look at what are the ports on these devices that are available for management. Okay. How can we access these devices? Is it through Telnet, SSH, port 80 for network-based systems anymore? Port 80, port 443, very common ways of managing these devices. So we automatically scan for those, see if they're available. But when it comes to network mapping, the thing that we're also doing is looking at whether SNMP is enabled or available on these devices. And for the network infrastructure, we are absolutely looking at SNMP, whether it's V1, V2, or V3, to then, in fact, you can see through the Access Manager tab that if I have the known community strings in here, we are going to automatically start to look at the RFC protocols and map out how all these devices are connected. For certain devices that may not follow standard RFC protocols, and I'm honing in on these wireless access points here, we actually have what we call drivers available in our cloud that will look at devices like WAPs, Cisco, Meraki, Ubiquiti, Access Networks, and we're adding more and more all the time. We are looking at how they have their clients, right? The clients or the endpoints that are associated to those WAPs connected.
Wow.
We'll even go as far as looking at what SSID are these devices on, what's the radio, what's the channel, and even you can go into a particular device. I always go into this Ratio device, but you can even see things like signal strength. So how well or how close in some sense is that device to the WAP? And if there are performance issues that we see, if we look at like the network performance of these devices and how they're behaving, if we're starting to see a lot of dropped packets and we have something like a low RSSI value, well, maybe we need to go install another WAP that's closer to that system. I mean, these are the types of things that you can do with Domotz that is awesome. And it's all around that network mapping, understanding how systems are connected, right? We just think this is a really, really powerful tool for understanding the network infrastructure.
Agreed. And I became aware of your product when I was speaking to a UK-based MSP who had installed it and said it paid for itself the very first network problem they have. So MSPs watching this, they will know it drives you absolutely wild. And I speak from experience when a client will phone and say, the network's running slowly. And you're like, well, you know, really? Is it just, does it feel slow or is it running slow? This tells you whether it's running slow, where the problem is, and how to actually resolve the problem. It pays for itself.
And I'm going to show you something. I don't know if it's still on here, but about a month ago, this particular device, it was literally just over a month ago. It was probably in September. This particular Sony device, it's a smart display.
Okay.
All of a sudden, I noticed up on the screen, it was losing network connection, right? It was just, you get that sign up there on your screen that says network connection lost. And I'm like, what happened? What does that mean? And I started playing with it. It was happening more and more. I started looking at it. I went to this page right here, looking at the round trip delay. And I started noticing that not only was I getting a high number of packets being dropped, but I was also seeing it was continuously going up. The performance was degrading over time. I started doing some tests. In fact, I ran a real-time test. In fact, you can do like real-time ping sessions here. So what this is doing right now is I just told from my laptop to the cloud down to that network to start buffering up and start pinging the device. So clearly it's a wired connection. So, and this is performing really well. It's usually more exciting when you use a wireless one. But what I found, Richard, is that I had a keystone jack that had gotten bent. So stress had been put on the cable.
Wow.
When I was working on the back of the rack, and it actually broke the keystone jack. And so performance, while it was still connected, the performance was getting lost. So I actually used this tool right here to find out where in the path this was going wrong. And yeah, now it works great.
That's incredible. And again, forgive me for jumping around here because just the way my brain works as a former MSP. But in terms of network switches and routers and things like that, is it possible to drill down into individual models and see individual ports and things? Or
Absolutely. So
cool.
Here, let's take this one. This one's interesting because it has device on it. So as part of that initial scanning that we do, we look at every single interface. In fact, we talk about the ports because knowing which device is connected to which port is what people ultimately want. But it's important to note that from an SNMP perspective, Domotz will interrogate something like 15 to 17 different sensors within each port of the device and display that inside our UI. So not only are we looking at which device is connected to which port, physically connected to that port, we're also looking at things like PoE, right? Is it a PoE-based device? How much power is being consumed? We're looking at the individual bandwidth of that device. In fact, here's a great example of a security camera that has a variable bitrate setting with an average of roughly 4 megabits. But you can see during either the night or the evenings that how its performance is being measured as seen by the switch. But we'll look at the switch for errors. We'll look at discarded packets. We'll look at, like I said, power, average output, all sorts of things that switch provides. We'll bring that from the SNMP tables or the MIBs within that switch and bring it into our UI to help the service provider.
Super impressive. I want to ask so many questions about different devices and that, but when it comes to network equipment, how about the maintenance side of things? So we're talking firmware updates and patching and things like that. Is that something that Domotz helps with?
It is, absolutely. I mean, part of that stems from the remote connectivity. I mean, one of the key things that we want to be able to do is, log directly into that system and be able to manage it. So if you want to do a firmware update, in fact, I'll show this here, right? Taking and connecting directly to that device.
Okay.
I assume you can see that here.
I can indeed, yeah.
So now if I wanted to get in here and mess around with the VLANs, right? If I wanted to do that, if I wanted to go add a VLAN, if I wanted to go change spanning tree protocol, if I wanted to do whatever, I can go do that remotely into that switch.
Brilliant.
The other thing, and this I think is what's so valuable about Domotz here, when it comes to the managed infrastructure systems, one thing that Domotz does for you is, and assuming that you've got it set up and configured the way you want, we also look at the managed switches and we can view what's changed within the configuration files.
Incredible.
Right? So, and Domotz will take a snapshot of that running configuration once every 6 hours. If anything has changed in that, we're going to save off that configuration that has changed, but then we can alert you to that change as well. So, knowing that, okay, VLAN 2 and VLAN 10 were added at some point, that's an important factor for this switch and for your knowledge. So that way you can either go back to it and make edits, or if you want to, just have it as a saved backup, you can. One thing that I will say here too, Richard, that MSPs use this for is everybody has their own custom way of doing things, right? But when you go and set up VLAN tables, or when you go and set up configuration files, a lot of times you want to replicate that from job to job because it's that consistency. With Domotz, you can save off that configuration file and then use it in a different agent if you want to do that. Another thing, so this comparison, I think this is really, really cool. The other thing that we will show you here, in fact, let's look at a different switch. Let's look at a Cisco switch here, because I think this one's more interesting. We actually play with this one quite a bit. So I'll bring up this Cisco SG350 and we'll look at the configuration there. So here, same type of thing, right? I can look at how, VLANs or whatever in this configuration change. But more importantly, you'll notice here, misalignment. So how many times, and I got to ask you this question, Richard, how many times did you go in, make edits on a job site, right? Edited their switch to do whatever you needed and then left. You forgot to save the running config to the startup config. Have you done that?
Yeah, so I did it at home here just yesterday, and it drove me up the wall. And because I was like, why is this not working? Why is this port not open? It was on a firewall, but there you go.
Yeah. So misalignment in firewalls, misalignments in managed switches. It's so frustrating because people will make the changes on the job site. Yeah. They'll head home or they'll head back to the office, and then a power outage occurs and everything's lost, right? Domotz will alert you when there's a misalignment between the running and startup config as well. Wow. And again, with the way Domotz works, you actually can, even if you got home or got to the job site and you realize, oh, I forgot to do that, you can log in remotely and fix it, right? And make those edits. So that's the beauty of what we're doing. We have this working really well with managed switches right now. We are adding in firewalls and to do the same type of capabilities. We're doing the same things with wireless access points as well. The interesting thing about WAPs and the interesting things about firewalls, and the reason we've been a little bit slower on that, a lot of those systems have, cloud-based services that already do that. Yes. Now, what's great about what we're doing here, and I think even on this site, I can show you, if I go back to the device list, here's a Cisco Meraki, a wireless access point in our office. So we actually work very well with their external cloud services. So Ubiquiti's Unify, Meraki, a lot of these systems that have cloud services, we're actually interrogating their cloud services to make sure that our interface works really well and that we're extracting the data from those services that are important to the network infrastructure and to these service providers.
Got it. Because it'll drive MSPs up the wall if they feel like they've got to jump into a dozen different systems to try and get an answer and not really sure where to look. So I like the idea of pulling that info.
To your point there. And I think this is really important. I recognize this as we've gotten into the service provider community. What makes managed service providers so valuable is the fact that they will take all these different tools that are out there in order to make their customers or their clients' business run efficiently. They're dealing with a ton of different tools. The last thing that I want to do is put another tool in front of them that they have to learn and be educated on, right? Our goal within Domotz is to provide a lot of power, a lot of knowledge about the network infrastructure, a lot of knowledge about the devices that are in the network, but we're trying to enable it into the tools that they already use. And you hear about these companies and you need to integrate with. We're absolutely building out integrations into the PSA tools and the RMM tools that our MSPs are using.
That's really cool because nearly every MSP that I know, their PSA tool, their professional services automation tool, is their business operating system. Everything should flow into that. They don't want to be going all over the place. So that's very cool to hear.
I use the term pane of glass, right? They want to have one pane of glass that they look at. They don't want to have 20 different monitors that say different things. Yeah. And we are definitely integrating with those PSA tools. And it goes back down to, and you and I haven't even talked about monitoring and alerting, right? But the idea is once Domotz is configured and set up, if you've got an important device that goes offline, it's about creating a ticket in that PSA tool so that you can prioritize and manage it appropriately. And that's what we're about.
Well, let's dig into that because you took the question out of my head, actually, when I was talking about monitoring and things. And specifically, I know you've touched on this here, but IP cameras. So I'm seeing more and more MSPs who are responsible for maintaining and making sure that security cameras and other things at their client sites are up and running. Has Domotz got some specific integration into any type of brand of IP camera, and what does that look like? Can you give us a little look?
Yeah, let me show you. So our view, right? As we've looked at the thousands of networks that we monitor, and as we look at the tens of thousands, if not millions, of devices that are monitored, as you start to look at businesses, very, very often businesses have IP cameras on the network. Those IP cameras consume bandwidth. There's usually a lot of them. There's an NVR. And one thing that's interesting that I don't think service providers, and I could be wrong, but I don't think a lot of service providers recognize is that security cameras are kind of like insurance.
Yes.
Nobody wants to ever use them, right? But when something happens in the business, that either could be internal theft, it could be a break and enter, right? It could be damage. It could be something happens in a parking lot. It could be a slip and fall that happens in a doorway, right? All of a sudden, the first thing that people do is they go to those cameras, right? It's like, okay, what really happened? I wasn't there. I need to see what happened here and who did what. Well, what's interesting is that many times, and this is the worst thing that can happen, but when you actually, let's go to this while I'm talking about this. The worst thing that can happen is you go to look at that camera just to find out that it's been offline for 2 weeks.
I was going to say, there's an analogy here with, or a comparison with server and workstation backups. MSPs who have been caught out, they don't, it's just working, it's fine. And then, I've deleted that spreadsheet or the server's died. No problem, we can restore it from backup that hasn't worked for 3 weeks.
Exactly. I mean, backups, that's a great example because backups are absolutely insurance, right? Just in case something happens. Cameras are the same way, it's just at a different business level. For a service provider, and to your point about making money, we believe, and part of the reason we focused on this is we believe we can give that service provider a little bit of an edge. So if we can tell them, if they can go to their client and say, hey, Mr. Client, when we did the scan, we noticed that you have 20 cameras on your network. We can make sure that those are online and functioning properly. So why do I say functioning properly? Well, everybody that's listening to us here knows that, it's very easy to ping the device and see it's online. But do they know that it's actually streaming video?
Yes.
That is much harder. So what we've done is we've made it so that when we discover an OnViv-based security camera, OnViv is a protocol that a lot of these security camera manufacturers use. What we can do is look at that. We can see what are the types of streams coming from that camera. But we also, and this is more importantly, I also can grab a snapshot directly from that camera. Yeah. So why is this of value? Well, not only do I see that it's online, but I see that it's streaming images as I expect. It's pointed in the direction that I expect. It's not covered up. It's not painted over. It's not damaged. This is where we see a lot of our service providers, especially here in North America, extracting more value than what they get by just monitoring, antivirus patches, PCs, and laptops. Leveraging a tool like Domotz really helps them expand their business.
Yeah. And without giving too much away, because I want people to reach out to you directly to have this conversation, but when we're talking about pricing, when we're talking about the cost per agent and that, and again, I know you'll have direct conversations with people, but give us a rough idea. Are we talking cents and pennies? Are we talking dollars and pounds? What does it look like?
Well, we can talk dollars, pounds, and euros. So for each agent that is deployed, right? We are a per agent business. We're not looking at per devices. And part of that is we look at that as a way of providing scalability to our service providers. We want them to know if you're going to put a Domotz agent in the network, you're looking, in the UK, you're looking at 19 pounds, right? A month, right? So 19 pounds per agent that's out there. If you do some of the integrations, in fact, let me close this down here. Let's just go to our webpage.
Sure.
It's right on our webpage. Nothing is hidden there. So we go to www.domotz.com and we go to pricing. There it is.
So very
in the UK, you're going to see 19 pounds. In Europe, in Asia Pacific, you're going to see 19 euros. But you get everything that we've been talking about. Right? You get all of these capabilities, the things that you are going to want to see, and I think this is important for service providers as well, Richard, and we should talk about this, is this certified integrations package. This is an extra 10 pounds per month, $10 a month. What this provides you, though, is integrations into a lot of these key tools. So we talk about PSAs, we talk about the RMM solutions, but Datto's Autotask, ConnectWise Manage. We're looking at integrating. In fact, we will integrate very soon into Automate. Synchro is in here. We're adding more and more of these traditional RMM tools and PSA tools. So that way dealers can really run their business more efficient, right? The service providers can use the tools that they use.
I love it. I love the transparency of the pricing.
Yeah, anywhere from 19 to 29 pounds. We think that fixed type pricing per month really helps service providers scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you a question as one engineer to another, as one geek to another.
Yeah.
What's the strangest device that you've seen monitored by Domotz, perhaps at a client site?
Strangest device. I love that question. That is a question that I haven't gotten. Strangest device that was monitored. That's a really good one, Richard. I don't know. I mean, there's so many. The funny thing is there's so many network connected devices out there that you could almost pick anything that has a network connection. We've definitely seen a lot of exercise equipment coming up in businesses. So Pelotons, right? Peloton bikes, Garmin scales, right? Body weight scales we see.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah. So those are a lot of like kind of the IoT world that's out there. We see. You see a lot of widgets that go on networks, but they're typically coming. What's interesting is you'll see them show up as like, Texas Instruments devices where they're running some sort of small processor in there that just gets them network connected, but you'll have coffee machines that are connected. Yeah, that's a funny question. Nobody's really asked me that. That's great.
I love it. I can see a new feature on the Domotz website, Strange Device of the Month, and you should encourage clients to send in stuff. So where I'm sat here, I can see all manner of devices, IP cameras and things. I'm thinking there's an IP camera a couple of minutes walk away from me that is homed on our family of guinea pigs that we've got here at home. So not a strange device, but probably a strange view for the device. So.
Well, you certainly could monitor your guinea pigs in that sense from anywhere in the world with Domotz.
So this has been absolutely fascinating. And I think, all talk of guinea pigs to one side, this is an invaluable tool for MSPs. I've spoken to UK-based MSPs who have said this has paid for itself within the first month of getting it up there. And we've talked about the opportunities with IP cameras and all these devices out there that all need to be monitored and maintained. In terms of what's next as Chief Product Officer, what can you share with us that's coming down the road? What's on the roadmap?
So integrations are key to us. And we've talked a little bit about that, but we want to make sure. And while we believe that Domotz is easy to use, we spend a lot of time in our user interface. I didn't mention this, Richard, but part of the application that is part of that three major portions of Domotz, right? The cloud, the agent, and the application. We've got mobile apps as well.
Wow.
So the mobile app is what really helps you when you're on another job site, keep in touch with others. We're continuing to focus on the application, making it sexy, making it easy to use, making it easy to understand. The other important thing is being able to look across all your agents. Right? If you wanted to, let's say you're monitoring 100 different clients out there, and you want to understand the status of all the Cisco switches that you've deployed across these sites. Very easy to use with us. We're focusing more and more on this and managing that. So key over the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to see a lot more integrations. You're going to see integrations into new tools, both documentation tools as well as traditional RMM tools, right? The key there, by the way, is leveraging the fact that we can gather such a strong, let's call it inventory asset or from an asset management and put that into those tools. We think that's a lot of value there. So we're adding into that. We are also spending time, and I mentioned this before, but looking at a lot more firewalls, right? WatchGuard, Sophos, Fortinet, FortiGate, all these things. We're going to integrate better with those so that way you guys have a good understanding, right? You as an MSP have a good understanding of what's going on in the network.
Impressive. And I feel as though we've only scratched the surface, but you've got a day's work to do. So I won't keep you up all day asking my questions about this. One final question, I guess. and that's around support. So you're based in North America, but you've got offices all over. If MSP is working with you, what about support for any issues they have? And we talked about the onboarding, ease of onboarding. Most MSPs I know just get it up and running themselves. But if anybody needed any help with that, what does the support structure look like?
So our support, first line of support is absolutely through email and chat. We believe that that's the fastest way to get responses to what's going on. We have people covering our support channels across the world. So pretty much regardless of which time you send a message out, somebody will respond very quickly. If we need to get online with you, get on a Zoom call, get on a phone call, we'll do that with you to help you get on board. We often have situations where a service provider is on a job site, they've done the install, maybe something's wrong with their account, maybe they misunderstood how to configure something. We're there to help them, and we're gonna do that quickly. To your point, what we find is because of our user interface, because of our focus of ease of onboarding, generally people don't have problems. Even when it comes to setting up VLANs and subnets, the Domotz side of that is actually quite easy. Yeah. So we have very few support issues that come to us.
I can well imagine this is a tool that looks incredibly powerful, but incredibly simple to jump in and get running. So thank you for your time today, JB. I've got a feeling we're going to need to catch up 3-6 months time, because this is a product that's going to grow and grow and grow. I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah, I'm excited about where we're going with this. And really, I'm excited about the response we're seeing from service providers. It's incredible.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to reach out to continue the conversation with you as one engineer to another, or to get in touch with Domotz, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, so if you want to email me personally, it's jb@domotz.com. But I encourage you, if you have technical questions, reach out to support@domotz.com. If you have sales related questions, business related questions, we've got sales@domotz.com. So our team is ready to respond, and we're excited to work with you and see what new opportunities are out there. Oh, and Richard, by the way, we were talking about integrations. We were talking about all of these, what we're doing from a roadmap. One thing that you're going to find is that we listen to who our customers say we need to be working with. So if you have a particular piece of hardware or a service that you think we should integrate with, send us a note. Tell us, support@domotz.com. And I review that all the time as the product manager. I work with our chief technical officer to do that. And we're pretty quick when it comes to that.
Well, I'm intrigued, and I think this is going to be a challenge for you here, JB. So anybody watching this, what's the craziest device you've got out there? Let us know. And when I catch up with JB in the very near future, we will see how that progression goes. JB, I've really enjoyed our time today. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best with this. This is an incredible product, and I think this is going to make a huge difference to so many managed service providers. So appreciate it and good luck.
Thanks for your time, Richard. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.